Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. All right, ladies, welcome back to another episode. So today we have with us Molly Claire, and Molly is a master coach instructor and founder of Holistic Master Coach Training. She helps coaches develop superior coaching skills so they can guarantee results for their clients while designing a simple, profitable business model. So we're going to have an incredible conversation. We're going to talk about things of business and just mindset, the holistic aspect of it, and really how to set yourself up for success so that you can feel like this is your life and you're creating it by your design. So welcome, Molly.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I am too. I know that we were chatting a little bit before we hit record, and some of the things that are really on our hearts and things that I know that you had spoken about is about creating effective change and how we can really hit our goals. And that's something I feel is really timely. And so many of our listeners and even in our audience, it's like, who doesn't want to have effective change, create that life change, that lasting change? But more importantly, how do we hit our goals? Because we're achievers. We have things that we're striving for, but not only do we want to hit those goals, but sustain them for the long term. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and kind of the story that got you into the works that you do.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes. And I am so passionate about this topic because, everyone listening here, right? Those of you listening, there are things in your life that you desperately want to be different, right? And sometimes we think about goals as the measurable number goals, but I also want to kind of broaden what we think about in terms of that. And I know you did ask me to introduce myself too. So I will do that as well and tell you more about me. But I just want to say that, I think this is such an important topic because everyone here has things you want to achieve in your relationships, right? You want an improved marriage. Maybe moms want to stop yelling at their kids every time their kids fall apart, or having a healthy weight, or maybe just stopping the obsession over food and body, right? All of those things. So I am so passionate about it because I know everyone listening here has things you want to change in your life. And it's really important to know and believe and see that it really is possible. So,
Yes, exactly. And it's for us to not only see it, but obviously believe it and then step fully into it. So it's sometimes when we look at it from the starting line of here I am today, here's where I want to go. And this is the woman I know that I need to become to get there. That's the steps. That's the plan. That's the how to that everyone's seeking, right?
yeah,
So
yes, exactly. I definitely want to talk about that today. When you asked about me and how I got on this journey, I started out 10 years ago building my business. I fell in love with coaching. I had my own life impacted by it. I knew I was meant to do it. I also was going through a divorce, becoming a single mom. I had 3 kids. I also was on the tail end of healing from chronic fatigue syndrome. Here I was at this moment in time. Okay, first of all, we all know building a business is no small feat anyway, but I had all these intersecting pieces going on. Like, okay, I know this is what I meant to do. I have to make sure I can provide for my kids. I need to make sure I can be there, present for my kids. And am I going to be able to do it given that I'm not really fully myself? Having said all of this, and why it really is relevant to all of you here listening is, just what Rachel just said about deciding who you want to be. In that moment when I was starting my business, I decided one day I will be a woman who is running a business, who is providing for my kids, who is available to them mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And I'm going to do it, even though I have all these reasons right now in my head that there's no way I can do it. I'm going to do it. And so, fast forward, I started my own coaching business. While I was building it, I was also doing a lot of contract work, teaching coaches, training coaches. And now, what I do is I specialize in offering training for coaches and a holistic master coach training for them because I really feel like coaches can change the world. Just like all of you listening have something you want to change in your life, if you're going to a coach to help you, I think that coach should be the most skilled, the most equipped to help you. So that's kind of where I've come and why I'm passionate about this.
I love that. And I love that you take that whole holistic approach to it because that's really speaks to the context of who we are as the confident woman, because we've recognized that we can't just excel in life for one facet of our life as well. So it's like, how do we become a whole person, a whole self, and taking that into account? And you hit on those four pillars, which really speak to me personally as well, because I mean, that was basically my whole philosophy and approach to it as well. Mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health and well being, because that's who we are as an individual. And for us to create thriving businesses and thriving relationships, we need to be of sound mind and clarity and in a place where we can feel that we are prepared and ready to receive this version that we're set out to become, right? So thank you for sharing that because it definitely speaks on what we have, as our message. So as you're going through this journey and you recognize, okay, here's where I am, and this is the woman I will become, that declaration, that affirmation, I love that because our words have power. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the challenges that you encountered at the beginning of your journey? Because if you look at it from hindsight's always our best teacher,
Mhm.
where we are today and the woman we need to become, we're going to endure hardships and obstacles and challenges. And I'm sure that, like you and many, battle self doubt, insecurities, that negative inner critic that will always tell you, like, who are you? Who do you think that you are that you can go do that thing? Right. So, love for you to unpack some of that and tell us, some of the stories and the narratives that you had to encounter and some of the stepping stones that led for you to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I would love to. And I also want to introduce this idea, which is like, I believe that there are sort of these fundamental pieces of ourselves that we have to understand as we overcome obstacles. So I want to put this as the precursor and then share with you some things and how it plays into that because I think it's going to be relevant to all of your listeners. When it comes to effective change in terms of me thinking about wanting to become that person, right? And all the obstacles that I would overcome, that I have overcome, it's really important that we're really aware of our mindset in any given situation, right? This is a lot of work that I do with my clients, that my clients do with their clients. Like, what are your beliefs? What are your limiting beliefs? What are you believing you're capable of or not capable of? And, working with really removing those limits and expanding what's possible. The other one that's so instrumental is understanding our emotional roadblocks. So when we think about the obstacles that we're going to come up against, we can't always think our way out of emotions. I know we would all like to think that we can do that, right? But our emotions are a big thing and we have to be aware of that as we implement change. And the other one that I want to mention is understanding of our nervous system because I don't think we hear a lot about feeling fear and doing it anyway and facing fear and overcoming fear. And that's very true. And we also, I think all of us have to be aware of our own biology and how our brain and our body works, right? Because if we are having a response of the nervous system that is putting us in a fear state where we can't move forward, it's not really very helpful. And then the last one that I'll mention before I share some of the challenges, for me personally is really setting yourself up to have the right type of action set in your life as you're implementing change. Because I know a lot of everyone listening can relate to I want to make this change. I'm going to set this goal. And then what do? We set up a plan for perfection. I know your book, I can see your book behind you, Chasing Perfection, right? It's like, I'm going to set up this plan of action that's foolproof. And yet it's really just set up to fail, right? Because it's perfectionist, it's exact, it's all or nothing, and it's not helpful. And like when you're working with your clients, as a coach, make sure you're giving the type of actions and strategies and everything with it where they can actually succeed. Because otherwise, what do? We just create more evidence that we can't follow through, that will never change, and on it goes, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm jotting down some notes here because some of the things that I want to circle back to, and it really speaks to, I think, our listeners, but even, from a personal perspective, it's like, how did I even get into writing a book called Chasing Perfection? It was because of that whole illusion that if we set ourselves up to perfectly, you know, cross our T's, dot our I's, do everything just so that we'll achieve that success or the outcome. But at the end of it, it's really about our own perceived value of our worthiness, our self
Mhm.
acceptance, are
Mhm.
we enough, this enoughness that we're chasing. And I love that you tackled about address the limiting beliefs and our capabilities. So those beliefs that we inherently are carrying around, to whether they were our own, they were passed on, they were shaped by our society, our peers, just our upbringing, right? There's just ways that we're conditioned through our environment.
Mhm.
But one of the things, and I love that you brought this up because, especially in the personal growth space and especially in this whole self improvement industry, we think that mindset is everything until
Mhm.
it's not.
Until it's not.
Until it's not. Until the emotions are telling us there's something sticking. And I love that you said understanding our emotional roadblocks. How
Mhm.
true is that? And for those listening that are like, oh my gosh, thank you for somebody saying that, because I've done all the things and I've read all the books and the podcasts and the inspirational things and the courses and the events and everything, but I can't get unstuck
Right. That's
because
right.
there is something deep down, deeply rooted in the emotional component that no mindset is going to outthink your emotions.
That's
Can,
exactly right.
can we unpack that for a second?
Yes, because I will tell you. So, you asked about some of the challenges I've come up against in this road. And one of the big ones for me is I did not really understand the value in not only paying attention to our emotions, but actually listening to what my feelings were trying to tell me and really trusting the guidance that I was feeling within me with regard to my business and with regard to my life, to be honest. And I got to a point where I had gone a direction in my business actually that seemed to make sense. And I had been advised to go in this direction. And yet something inside of me was saying, no, it didn't feel it was in alignment. It clearly was not the path for me inside. And I know everyone listening knows that, well, most people at least know this, right? Where we keep trying to convince ourselves to do a certain path because it seems to make sense or an expert told us to, or this is the right thing. And for me, what that meant was a year in my business of spinning my wheels, doing a lot of work, doing a lot of things, and not having a lot of growth or expansion. And I really see now that I needed to have that experience to understand that my feelings and what was coming to mind from within mattered more than the way I was trying to think what I was feeling. That was definitely one situation that taught me a lot about listening to the feelings that we have within us. And sometimes those roadblocks are there, those emotional blocks. Sometimes it means there's an emotion that needs to be kind of untangled and attended to in certain ways. And sometimes it's there as a service to us to say the direction you're going is not the direction you should be going.
You said that very well. I understood it because I think from one, from your story to my story, how much that relates, because I had gone through a very similar experience. And mine was about, I would say, anywhere between 12 to 16, 18-ish months before I realized, wait, hang on, this isn't even where I'm supposed to be.
Mm,
How did I get derailed and detoured? And, as you said, like you had somebody advise you and guide you in that direction, because I think if you're in a pivoting position. You're kind of, okay, do I go left? Do I go right? And sometimes we look outside ourselves to seek that advice. Like, hey, I'm in this situation. What would you do if you were in my situation? And somebody say, oh, you would go left. Okay. So let's just kind of roll with that for a second here for this example. So now you've taken that consideration. You're not saying one way or the other that that person was wrong because you're literally sitting on the crossroads undecided. So indecision is a decision.
Mhm.
So taking that first step, you turn left and you venture down. Now it's like 12 plus months. You're like, I think that I just got further off path than where I should be. But your internal knowing knew you were
Mhm.
on the wrong path.
Mhm.
So, as you said, sometimes you needed to veer off path for that experience to teach you the lesson because being at that crossroads, your knowing did not make the decision. Sometimes our logic, our thinking mind does not align with our emotional heart line, right? So, that's the soul component that's like, we have a purpose, we have a calling here, and we might not know our next steps, but we could seek externally for advice and support, but always check with the full final approval, right? That's the decision
That's it.
making in you.
That's
And that,
it.
yeah,
Well, I know, and as you were talking, like, I just and this is always the case, right? It's like the thing that throws us off course always has a lesson that we needed to have, right? That we needed to experience. And so what was interesting is as I went this direction because a trusted mentor said this is what you should do, and I decided to try to outthink what I was feeling inside. I go that direction. Well, it definitely solidified within me the importance of building a business that aligns with who you are, with building a business that supports the life that prioritizes your own values, right? And so, what ended up actually happening as a result of this is that became a core fundamental piece of the work that I started doing with my clients. And that even within, I teach my coaches in master coach training, and we work on those four fundamentals that I mentioned. I would say perhaps the most important work we do in there is I'm teaching them over and over again to connect with themselves, to trust themselves, to listen to those messages, to be in alignment. Because who out there tells us to do that? No one, right? Well, not no one. We're telling people that, right? But for the most part, it's like we have all the advice and all the ideas and go this way and go that way. There's so much noise. And so my favorite part about the work I do with my clients is it's almost like for this entire year, I kind of use this word like half jokingly, like I'm always indoctrinating them with this idea of like connect with who you are, how you feel matters, your values matter, your priorities matter, your mission matters. Your knowing is such a gift. Pay attention to it. And I just can't say enough about it because as I'm helping my clients to do that, not only does it make them stronger as a person, stronger as a business owner, stronger as a coach, but they're then able to extend that to their clients because whatever their clients are coming to them for, whether it's improving relationships or in the mom space or with business or goal setting, they're able to help their clients to instill that same sense of self connection and trust and alignment, which is just everything. Just everything, I think.
exactly. And to give you credit on that, it also helps validate you for where you're at, right? Because it comes full circle. It's this cycle of reciprocity. Like, if I'm giving this because this is of my true self, I'm giving it to my clients, who in turn are giving it to their clients, to their customers, to the family, right? It's that whole ripple effect. And so when
Yeah.
you're in a place of just flow, it goes back to that intuitiveness, that knowing, that trust instinct. Building our self confidence comes from building our self trust. And sometimes when we
Yes.
have been off path, we start to discount our own self. Rachel, how could you have known now to go off that path? But it's the journey back to self, because when you started on that path, you're a different person by the time you recognize that you were off path. So it's about undoing some of that quote unquote damage, but it's not damage because you learned lessons throughout this journey. that as you come back and you say, hey, you know what? Let's pull ourselves together. We might have made a mistake, but yet I don't believe in mistakes. I believe that there was lessons and learning opportunities that come from that. So as we're rebuilding our own self-trust, we dive deeper into that internal instinct that says, now we're starting to trust the knowing, that intuitiveness, and that little nudge that will tell you, yeah, second guess that. But before we take that first step, let's rethink that. So I love that you share that because connecting with true self. But who is true self?
Such a good question, right? And how do we separate it out? Because we all know that we can have feelings that we're not sure we should trust that feeling, right? Because we have all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of emotions. Create a habit of checking in with yourself throughout the day. So if you remember nothing else from this podcast, if you would set a timer in your phone, a little alarm to go off 3 times a day as a reminder to have you ask yourself either something like, how are you feeling? And those, I know not all of you can see me, but you saw the video. I have my hands like over my heart and I'm kind of closing my eyes, like, hey, how are you feeling? Just a chance to check in. Another option of what you can ask yourself is, what do you need right now? As small as it is, if every one of you would create a practice of doing this for a week, what you're going to find is that you are tuning in to yourself in a way that creates self connection. And the more familiar that conversation and that self connection becomes, the more clear those whisperings of your intuitiveness and your knowing are. I can say that I have a pretty high level of self trust and self connection because I've had so many experiences where I've self abandoned, where I haven't paid attention to that. I have this practice of connecting with myself, and I know the difference between being connected and listening to what's true and what's within, and having feelings that are just scary, that are just emotions that I kind of need to allow to come up and dissipate. Yeah.
Great advice. Definitely. So, checking in with yourself, how important that is. And sometimes I get it. We're very busy. We're all busy, but giving ourselves even a 30-second pause,
Mm,
to
mhm,
breathe. We've all got 30 seconds in between our multitasking and our workloads and everything that's piling up. Making ourselves that number one priority. It's also key to returning back to you to check in with those emotions. And I know that you had mentioned about feeling. And I want to add to that because I think that's so important because when we start to feel something, we tend to distract, numb out, or just disengage. That's the complete opposite of where we're empowering you to really do this on your own.
mhm,
So when you feel those feelings come up, let them pass through you because there's a difference between feelings and emotions.
mhm, mhm,
Feelings are meant to be felt. Emotions meant to catch your awareness and really dive deep into tackling what it is that's left unpacked, something that's nudging us. Sometimes we got to do a little bit deeper dive and sometimes we got to unpack some heavy, scary things. But those are the emotional components. But those things that we haven't unpacked from years ago will continue to burden us as we continue trying to build this life, this successful life, whatever that looks like, however you define success. That is ultimately up to how you also receive and identify what success means for you. Because even that key word, success, could be an emotional trigger.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and then that causes the feelings. The feelings are what we see exhibited, the angst, the hurry, the distraction. Feelings need to pass through. Emotions need to be addressed. They need to be met head on. Just like when we say meet your fears head on, we can't even address those fears until we've addressed the emotional component.
Mhm, yes. It's so true. I mean, and that's why I think that I think it's important that we call out on an episode like this, right? The importance of our feelings because we do more and more live in a world that is just very cognitive. And we almost think of emotions as like emotions or feelings, either one, right? As just a nuisance. And in
Mhm.
fact, just before we did this interview, I was teaching a class to my coaches about emotion work and the value of it and talking about how when we see feelings as something that's insignificant or something to be solved or fixed or shut down, we actually miss out on some of the greatest transformations that we will experience as human beings. We miss out on learning what's lacking in our relationships. We miss out on paying attention to where in our lives personally we're not fulfilled, right? We miss out on so many things. And so, I mean, just a conversation to say, hey, what you're feeling, it matters. Let's make a little space from it. Let's learn from it. It's one of the key elements of true lasting change and personal growth in every area of our life.
I'm going to second that because that was something I personally had to experience. This is going back over a decade ago, and it really was the foundational to build my life and my business and what we see here, the podcast to the confident woman, it's movement, this collective movement aspect of it. Because I had to unpack so much of that, which, was very heavy. But had I not, I wouldn't have set myself up for the long haul of where I'm at today. And that's why we're so committed to creating lasting change. So, what does lasting change mean? It doesn't mean that you're not going to feel those things. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have those thoughts or self doubt's not going to pipe up. Listen, we're humans. We are human beings. We feel, we experience, we've gone through things, but it's about becoming more resilient and nipping that before it gets the better hand and takes us out in that sense where we feel incapacitated or debilitated by our own thoughts and our own past or how we emotionally feel today will then dictate and determine who we become tomorrow. Right. So a lot of this really does stem from that emotional component. So to circle back to what Molly had said, you cannot outthink your emotions.
Mhm.
No amount of work mentally can make you not feel or address those things that we might be running from.
Mhm. I think about, as you were talking, it just kind of prompted me to think back to, what we started this discussion with, which is this idea that all of you here have things in your life that you want, right? Some version of yourself that you want to step into. And, when I think back about my journey of starting building this business, I always think about it as if it's this new identity that we're stepping into, right? All of you can think about who is this person you want to become. It's like this new identity is at the top of a mountain. And I love hiking. It's my favorite thing to do with my free time. So that's probably why this analogy makes so much sense to me. But it's like, when you think about if you're going to climb to the top of a mountain, you know that along the way there are going to be rocks and, probably some prickly bushes. There's probably going to be some poison ivy maybe along the way. There's going to be dead ends. There's gravity. There's going to be fatigue that we experience. And so it's kind of like, I think, a really good way to think about committing to creating change is thinking about this identity of this new person that you want to become being at the top of this mountain. And along the road to getting there are going to be mindset and belief blocks. There are going to be big emotions and feelings that you need to feel. And there are going to be things that you feel really afraid of. And you're going to have to make sure that you're creating enough safety for your system to move forward. And there are going to be actions that you're going to need to take that are going to be totally new for you. And you're going to have to be consistent with them. And I think when you can think about for each of you this journey of getting from where you are to the top of that mountain and knowing that you can make space for shifting beliefs as you need to, attending to your feelings, setting yourself up with good habits, and really creating a sense of support for yourself in who you're surrounding yourself with, you will get there as long as you're committed to making this change for yourself. That commitment is the key. And then the rest is just a matter of one step at a time, one foot after the other.
Yes, I love the analogy because it helps paint that picture. When we look at, again, we'll just use the word success because success ultimately is you're creating this, you're stepping into your goals and that is successful, right? So it's like how to become more successful. Well, set those goals, how you feel along those ways to recalibrate and you get to redefine it as you go. But that is setting you up for the long haul. That's the sustainability. And I think for anything in life and business, it's about the sustainability. We're not trying to go repeat this process again in another 3 months after we've overcome it. So it's this journey, and the journey is constantly evolving. You're evolving. And even though your goal point might be similar, your steps and the direction might change a little bit. And you're just navigating. It's all about just correcting course as you go, figuring out which way the wind's blowing. That direction, it's okay to be flexible instead of holding on so rigidly, which is what a perfectionist does, that we know doesn't sustain. We can hit the mile marker, but we're not going to be able to maintain that at a pace that is going to set us up for the long haul.
I mean, that it's so true. And it's like anytime we've achieved something incredible or anyone that has, their path was never what they thought it would have been, right? But as long as we commit like one way or another, if I'm going up this mountain, I might have to go around a different way. I might have to go back down. I might need to backtrack, but I'm, going to get there. And I know for me, it meant overcoming limiting beliefs about how much I believed I could make as a woman. I had a big belief there that was stuck. It meant overcoming emotions, fears of failing, fears of, shame and embarrassment. It meant creating a sense of safety. And it meant, just doing whatever it took to take the steps I needed to learn the skills and take the action. And I believe we're all capable of it. I really do.
I do too. And like what Molly just said, you're going to have setbacks. But that's all part of it. That's the journey. And progress is not linear. It's a big old scribble on your paper because that's what life is, right? We're always trying to find like, what's the shortcut? And they say, the straightest line to get to where you need to go is, the direct path. But it's like, yeah, but that's not the reality of it.
It doesn't really work that way most of the time.
It feels like you're trying to swing at a pinata with a blindfold on your eyes, but we're just doing the best we can with what we know. And we figure out as we start to learn and know better, right? Oh my goodness, you've articulated this so well. And just sharing those examples and the analogies and for you pulling in those personal pieces adds an extra layer. So I just want to thank you for helping us address some of those things that are, sometimes I feel like it's the elephant in the room, especially in that personal growth mindset space. It's just been incredible. I would love for you to share with our listeners how they can follow along with you on your journey, how they can learn more about the works that you do, and where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, I have a podcast as well. In fact, I interviewed Rachel on my podcast, so that's pretty fun. The Masterful Coach podcast, where I support coaches in having phenomenal coaching skills and having ideal life and business balance. You can find me at mollyclaire.com and learn about my programs and Master Coach training. And follow me on Instagram for inspiration, Molly Claire Coaching. And I know there's a freebie as well that I think is in the show notes. If you go to myperfectbiz.com, you can have some great resources from me, including something that will help you really align with your ideal life, which kind of goes along with what we talked about. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And everything will be in the show notes below. So be sure to give Molly a follow. If this episode resonates with you, be sure to connect. That's what we do. We put our messages, our hearts, our souls out there. And of course, the best compliment you can give is when you reach out and let them know that their work impacts you. So thank you. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.